As China continues to make frequent appearances in our media outlets, there continue to be tensions with Russia, and people are questioning the different political systems around the world more than ever. Many people are asking about red tourism. And if this is you, then you've come to the right place. Because in this video, I'm going to teach you what red tourism is, why it exists, and where it exists. It is a fascinating concept, so stay tuned to learn more. Red tourism is an interesting phenomenon. It relates to tourism which takes place in former or current red countries, e.g. communist countries. The most common examples are China and also Russia, but there are other places where red tourism takes place too. Red tourism destinations offer an insight into what it is and what it's like to live under communism. The term does originate from China, which is why it is one of the most common examples of a red tourism destination. The premise of red tourism is to promote locations with historical and cultural significance to the ruling Communist Party's history, while also providing an impetus to tourism and local businesses. Red tourism essentially seeks to spread awareness about the history of the Communist Party of China, starting from its origins. So I think it's really quite fascinating how rapidly the red tourism industry has grown in recent years. But why? Well, there are a few different reasons why red tourism might have grown in popularity over the years. As I've discussed a few times on this channel, people nowadays are often rejecting the slower-paced, all-inclusive relaxation style of holidays these days. Instead, people are looking to explore and to learn, to take in all of a place and really experience a destination. This has definitely had an impact on the growth of more education-style tourist destinations. Another reason for the growth in red tourism, in China at least, is definitely the support that it gets from the government. Back in 2010, officials across 13 cities signed the China Red Tourism Cities Strategic Cooperation Yan'an Declaration. They did so to advance red tourism across these areas in order to benefit the party and the people in cultural, political and economic ways. They wanted to support or promote the national ethos and also improve the socio-economic development of these areas, which were often rural and poorer areas of the country. These places are Anyang, Yulin, Guanyang, Zhenyi, Yan'an, Jiangtan, Rujin, Jingyanshan, Bei's, Linyi, Shijiazhuan, Huinin, and Qinyang. And please excuse me for the terrible pronunciation of those destinations. I might live in China, but I definitely don't speak Chinese, as you can tell. A third factor in the growth of red tourism can be linked to the recent increase in popularity for communism itself. Reports show that around 1/3 of US millennials approve of communism. As more and more people become unhappy with the current state of political affairs in their home country, more and more people will start to look elsewhere. People want a system that works, and they might be interested in some hands-on, real-life research. And they can do exactly this by investing in red tourism. But who are these people? Who are these red tourists? Well, red tourists are essentially anyone engaging in red tourism activities. You can visit China and not be a red tourist, of course, if you're going and not explicitly paying attention to anything communism related. Red tourists will typically engage in visiting and exploring museums, memorials, political bases, meeting sites, and more. The Financial Express reported that 40% of tourists at red sites across China are between the ages of 21 and 30. Especially recently, red tourists in China have been domestic tourists, travelling within their home country. This is naturally due to the impact of the pandemic, but people across the world have still been known to visit China's red tourist sites, as well as those in other countries too. It may come as no surprise that most red tourists are actually Chinese. The ease of domestic red tourism is one thing, but Chinese tourists also enjoy visiting sites in other parts of the world that link to their communist heritage. And there are lots of benefits to red tourism. Let's dig deeper and take a look what they are. There are lots of benefits, hence the Chinese government's involvement really. It can be used to further the ideas of the party, which, if you are communist, is a huge benefit. On the flip side of this, Red tourism in former red countries, think the Soviet and the Balkan states, serve as a reminder of the horrors that happened there under communism. In this way, it is an example of dark tourism, and both of these things are helpful to different people with different ideologies. Red tourism obviously brings in money to certain areas that might not see many visitors otherwise. Museums charging entry fees, for example, and people running tours. These are income streams that come directly from red tourism. China alone boasts a projected extra 20 billion yuan for every year thanks to red tourism. And this type of tourism is, of course, a form of educational tourism. No matter which side of the argument you're on, there's no denying that visiting museums and places of historical and political interest is educational. This type of field learning is great for college or university students to help advance their studies. It's also brilliant for educating the average person who just wants to learn a little bit more about communism. But as with all forms of tourism, it is far from perfect. Of course, there are also many criticisms, in China specifically, from those who oppose communism. They point out that this type of tourism very much glorifies this ideology. People who are anti-communism tend to feel quite strongly about this, which is why they criticise red tourism. There are other people who view this negatively too. Leaving members of the Red Army, the Army and the Air Force of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic or Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics, have something to say too. They are opposed to the Disneyfication of communist locations. These people see the popular sites as war memorials and say that they should be respected as such. So, we know what red tourism is, but where is it? Of course, the most popular destinations for red tourism are in China. Red tourism in China spans the entire country. The 13 cities that I mentioned earlier are of course highly promoted within the red tourism industry. And the 5 most popular locations are Yan'an, where people visit Mao Zedong's revolutionary base when the Red Army arrived at the end of 1935 following the Long March. It's considered somewhat of a holy land for the Communist Party. Shaoshan, which is the hometown of Mao Zedong, a Chinese communist revolutionary. There are 82 individual red tourism spots here. Nanchang, which is the capital of Jiangxi province. This is the site of the August 1st Nanchang Uprising of 1927, which was led by Zhu Enlai and He Long. Jinggang Mountain. Not only is this place beautiful, but this scenic mountain is home to 29 historical red tourism sites. These include the former residence of Mao Zedong, as well as the first hospital for China's Red Army, a revolution museum and a battle site. Zhanyi. This is the location of the Zhanyi Conference, held in 1935 during the Long March. It was during this conference that Mao Zedong was first elected as the leader of the Communist Party of China. We then have Russia. Despite no longer being a communist country, Russia is still very popular with red tourists. Some popular locations or sites include Moscow, where people go to visit the Kremlin, which is the Russian political residence, the Red Square, which is the site of official military parades and demonstrations by Soviet armed forces, Gorky Leninsky, which is Vladimir Lenin's second home, the State Museum of Political History of Russia, the Museum of Soviet Arcade Games, which is located in St. Petersburg, and the Museum Sculpture Park in Moscow. And there are also many museums of communism located in former communist countries. These are a really accessible type of red tourism. Trips to China and Russia can obviously be expensive, lengthy and difficult depending on where you're coming from. But these museums provide a slice of communist tourism across Europe. There's lots to see and take in, like games and cars from this time period, as well as weapons and lots more. Some examples include the Museum of Communism in Prague in the Czech Republic, the Museum of Occupations and Freedom Flights in Vilnius, Lithuania, the House of Terror Museum in Budapest, Hungary, the Warsaw Uprising Museum in Warsaw, Poland, the Stasi Museum in Berlin, Germany, the Museum of Occupations in Tallinn, Estonia, the Museum of Soviet Vehicles in Jārvāģāni, Estonia, and the Corner House in Riga, Latvia. Other major red tourism areas or sites include the Berlin Wall in Germany, Moncada Barracks in Santiago de Cuba, Brutus Sculpture Park in Lithuania, Memento Park in Budapest, Hungary, Vin in Vietnam, the Neon Museum in Warsaw, Poland, Buzludza in Bulgaria, the House of Flowers in Belgrade, Serbia, Finca Biran in Cuba, and Cannon Fort in Vietnam. Whether you are a fan of communism or not, red tourism is a really great way to learn. And learning is one of the best things, I believe, about travelling. And you can find out why in this video.